Welcome to Safety Chats. Host Jason Stark, Director of Safety at Baldwin Safety and Compliance, shares decades of aviation experience and a passion for safety. Let's get started with this week's Safety Chat.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Jason Stark, and today we have part 2 of our podcast on safety leadership. Mark Myers is here to dive deep into strategies and perspectives that can truly transform how we approach safety in our organizations. Get ready for a wealth of insights that are sure to leave you both informed and motivated.
Jim, you do consulting and you look at other companies around the country. Can you talk about what happens to an organizations when the management is spoken to, delegated to lower management, but is sloganized? It's not really performance managed at every level organization. What goes on? And tell me about some of the pitfalls when that starts happening. It's safety in everything we do, but yeah, that's a slogan, but there's not the tenet. There's not the management walking the walk and talking the talk. So
yeah, I refer to those as birdcage policies. The paper I put in the bottom of my birdcage, because they actually have very little. The challenge when you do that is the message that you're sending is we have created some new policy, some new procedure, some new standard way of working, and here it is. And I need you to read this, sign off on the policy, and I need you to begin to work this way. Well, if I'm an employee and I get that, and that's the tone and the mannerisms behind delivering that message, it really does become quite meaningless. I think employees look at it as a nuisance getting in their way. It's just another thing coming down from the top. So I think, like we talked on earlier, if I'm asked to sign something, you can't do that. And if you have a division, you have an organization, department where that occurs, you really got to be back to that scene, to that leader of that organization, of that sector, whatever it is, and say, look at it. This isn't who we are. We do this. We one of the things that I don't think companies do enough of is they don't put the why. So what is the reason that we're doing this? Why is this important to you as an employee? But why is it important to the organization? And how do you do that? So I really think unless you're willing to spend time developing and mentoring from, as you said, from the top down, I really think it becomes just another, like I said earlier, it's a transactional thing. I got a policy. My manager put it out there, but it doesn't have any meanings to me personally. Now, from performance management, look, I think there's just culture and there's various different ways we address these things. I think to do that and you talk about it, you deliver it and you have the why behind it. And you say, listen, so we're doing this now and it's meaningful and we're going to review it. And I think that from a performance management standpoint, you can directly work with the employee and try to figure out why are they following it and why do they think it's a good thing and learn from it. But also from those employees that may not be following it. And the challenge then is to figure out why. And I think most people would agree. Look, 90% of the people that come to work, they come to work and they want to do a good job. They want to be a team player. They want to fit in. You're always going to have people that are some of those outliers. And so you got to figure out how to deal with those outliers. So, the whole thing about one apple spoiling the car, it's really true, particularly in a remote location, as you said, a diverse workforce. If you happen to have somebody who's not fully engaged, doesn't really believe or buy into the culture, you've poisoned the whole group of people, quite frankly. And recovery from the poisoning is tough, right? You got to go down and you got to make management changes. You got to explain things. So you just got to do it from the beginning. And I just say to companies, when I go look at them, I go look at the policies and I go, you got them. Great. But how do you know they work? And why did you originally implement them? And are you achieving what you thought you were going to be achieving? And how do you know? Have you measured it? Do you, even at the simplest level, do you have a direct conversation with the people that it impacts to say, is it working? Is it not working? Far too often I find that people are busy. They're doing stuff. Something comes out. There was a problem. So now we overreact and we create all new policy and we drill it into people and they're just looking at us like, what is going on? So again, I think it comes back. I say this to everybody. If you want to have a successful company, you want to have a company where your employees want to work there, where retention rate is high, where workers' comp claims are low because people are being cautious, they're understanding things. If you want to do that, you need to spend time on the culture. And far too many people just don't do it. Many years ago, I presented at a big air medical conference about the importance of culture and safety and risk management. And I'll never forget, a guy asked a question, he goes, look, I think everything you see is great, but it takes time to change cultures. We don't have time. And it just struck me like, you don't have time. What are you talking about? You have time today, right now, to go start. And maybe it takes you 2-year journey or 3-year journey. But if you don't start today, it's not going to get better.
Right.
And that journey is just going to be delayed. So you got to do it, I think.
It's interesting to add that I'm seeing very few safety dashboards with employee turnover is one of the metrics that is right in the dash itself. So I think you touched on it. It's huge. It really is.
It is giant. I think you probably also remember I was asked some years ago to get the presentation from the LA FAA office to Part 135 and Part 121 people. And I remember saying to them, you want me to go present about culture to the 121 guys? Maybe really? And they're like, yeah, we went you on this panel. So I did it and I enjoyed it. I remember speaking to some of the persons that were there from those large companies. And it was true that you could understand, they believed it. They said, yeah, I get it. But Jim, come on, I've got 40,000 employees and I'm all over the place. I got employees in other countries. And I said, I get that. I really do understand that. And so I said, but you still have an obligation to those employees and you have an obligation to make their workplace safe. You have an obligation to the company, quite frankly, and whoever your shareholders are. So look, you've got to come across as somebody who doesn't drive policy for the sake of that, but does it because it's meaningful and we want to make sure that we all have great quality of life. We spend a lot of time at work. Why not make it safe? Why not make it a place that's fun? Why not make it a place where we get together? I think you always know, I think you know this about me. If I can't have humor at work, I'm not going. So a little humor goes a long way sometimes too when you're trying to teach people. So a little humility goes a long ways. Yeah.
Let's circle into that. When you do your leadership training sessions, and how do you tell leaders how to build enough time to really make a safety management part of your day in, day out? How do you find the bandwidth to make that happen, to be visible amongst everything else that you do on a daily basis? So what's your inside trick? What's the gouge?
Again, I think it goes back to starting small. We all in our daily schedules and our busy schedules, particularly nowadays with so many of us being distributed in other places and time management, there are just subtle little things you can begin to do that begin to help people realize and start asking questions and realize that you care about it. So even if it's just walking up to somebody and asking them about what they're doing and looking at it with true interest and asking them the why from it, you're learning, you're taking information in about what's going on. But you're also, I think, you're relaying to those people that it's okay to take a step back and say, what's going on here? Why? I don't want to keep pushing forward. It's like that thing with the tailbone. It's small. Let's just go ahead and fly it. We'll keep our eye on it. It's taking the time back. And once you do that, even on the small steps, staff will begin to see you differently for one. But they also begin to think like, well, if it's important to them and they're actually taking time to talk with it, maybe it should be important to me. And so I don't know any other way of doing it, quite frankly. Whether you have 100,000 employees or you have, 10 employees, those of us who choose to be in leadership and we choose to be there, we have the obligation to do things. And I always laugh. In the old days, they would call you an administrator. Somebody was the administrator. And so I was talking with young leaders a long time ago and I looked up the word administer and I said, this is what it means to administer. And it's to give back. It's to be a servant leader. It's to help people be successful. And I said, so maybe we've lost that term, but we shouldn't lose what was behind it. The true meaning when you look it up. And it's not just a, check a box. I've shown leaders that you pay attention to this kind of stuff. Like I said earlier, I think workers' comp claims are great where you can see it going down the cost associated. We all know what the cost of attrition is. It is very, very, not only is it economically expensive, but it's disrupting to your core organization, right? And you have gaps and new people. And so look, that's a huge savings. If you have people that want to stay and want to engage, that's great. I'll say this in all honesty. I think there's the potential of losing people along the way because they don't want to buy into this. They don't want to take the time. And so other things I would tell leaders also is you need to build time into your schedule to reflect. And that's really hard to do. And when I was running around doing all kinds of stuff, it was hard. I made sure, and it was on my calendar every day, whether it was 15 minutes or whether it was an hour. I blocked that time, closed the doors, just to kind of reflect on my own leadership, but also to really start looking at those challenges. And it's hard to do. I didn't do it every day. There's days that consume. What I'm trying to convey is if you're not walking the walk, if you're not showing support, if you're not asking questions, you're not trying to help people to have a better work environment, you're probably just, again, doing the paper from my birdcage. People they see through it, right? Look, you talk about risk mitigation and safety management and the culture behind it. Think about all the other things that they're getting jammed down their throat. External policies, regulatory changes, HR changes, pay practices, all these things. And they begin, it's overload, quite frankly. It reminded me when we started putting like HSONs and all different things on the helicopters, They are great adjunct as safety tools. They can also be a real nuisance when everything's going off. I know I'm flying in low terrain and there's terrain around me. I can see that because I'm picking up somebody on mountain range. If they you get over it. So culture that you develop is to help them understand, take your time, read it. And I think once you have a book, they get to do that. And I think for leaders, I've seen it time and time again. I had people that were recalcitrant, didn't really want to buy in. But when they started seeing their peers buy in, or when they had an experience where they did use something that we were talking about, and they did kind of go down that, and they found that resolution was actually simpler than other means, I think that's how you really start doing that.
A quick war story was when we were used to have safety inquiries or safety committees, and we always had a jump seat. Everybody was welcome to come in, and you would open the door and, well, here's our CEO and Jim's on the call today.
Yeah.
And you would contribute, you'd listen, and you don't realize just what that moment in time did for promoting and bringing credibility and bringing support to everything that we were doing, and that you cared. And it may be, thanks for taking that 10 minutes or half an hour or an hour, whatever, out of your schedule to make that happen. It was just tremendous. That was me. We were 500 employees. So
yeah, no, Mark, you're so spot on. I used to tell Brenda, my assistant, I mean, like, look, if there's something important like that, find a solution for me on my calendar, do something. I said, maybe I won't want to get a cup of coffee instead I'll jump on the call. But look, I think when you do that, you show that it's meaningful to you from the top. And you're right. I think it becomes infectious to some degree. People start realizing it's a real thing.
This has been excellent. Jim, and just any closing remarks as far as leadership? What, if there's one final things you'd like to lead other than the birdcage idea?
Yeah.
Which I love.
I think for me, what I've learned in my career, and what I think is important for all leaders, is to listen. I don't think we listen enough. And when you listen and when you ask probative questions, you will discover so much about the organization. And actually, you discover a lot about yourself, like, right? And I mean, I think people have always joked that they call me the why CEO. And it wasn't to be, why do we need this? It was why, like, I need to understand it because you're the expert. Look, I always tell people in leadership, the farther you go up the food chain, the more accountability you have, but the less direct impact. And day to day, you're there to drive things. So you have to build a good team and you have to be willing to accept those accountabilities, but also then to help people see through that. And so I tell people, first thing is you have to listen. Second thing is you have to have empathy for what they're doing. And I think you can have empathy for what they're doing and understand it and then share that. Boy, you grow as a leader like leaps and bounds. I mean, once I started that type of listening and then digging in and the why, and not a why from, because I'm going to cut cost. Because oftentimes, as you'll know, when I got to the why, I found out I had to spend money. It's so cool. But it was the right decision. It was the right thing to do. So I start with those every time. Listen. I know it's hard to do in a busy world. And when you're particularly a young leader, you're going to the wall as fast as you can, but listen and then really ask questions. You can't ask a question for the sake of asking it. You have to ask it and probe the things that you're willing to get your hands dirty with and change.
We call it maybe humble inquiry.
It's true. That's what I meant. Having empathy and humility, they're hard traits, quite frankly. I was a type A guy. You just drive. And so humble, what are you talking about? Humility, what you want me to do what? But look, once you start doing that, your employees do it. Real quick. I mean, I think you're going to remember this. We had a very, very high season time Coast Guard pilot that was flying for us, who was also a great guy and who tried to walk the walk and talk the company. And crew wasn't with him. He's in a helicopter. He departs because he was leaving them with the crew at the hospital somewhere else. And he goes in and invert an IFC. He's a highly qualified IFR pilot. He's got the right aircraft to be flying in the clouds. So what does he do? He knew where he was. He was at 7,000 feet coming out of a higher elevation place, dropping into a valley. He could have just slowly drifted down over the valley and tried to come out, but declared an emergency. So it's on the record, does it, and they vector him and everything's fine. He flies the aircraft. But what was so cool about it wasn't that he declared an emergency. It was that he said, I want to share this across the company about what happens to me just now. And I think that's when my heart, I think, got the biggest it ever did, because it meant it's working. Our culture is working. We have a guy that's willing to stand up and say, look, this is me. And I'm a pretty high qualified guy, but look, I just made a mistake and here's what I did about it. But here's the learning mode. And look, it was great. He didn't lose his job. He probably did a better job of performance management than any of us ever could have done with him for what happened. So that to me was a defining moment when an employee is willing to share their mistake with their peers. And like I said, people don't come to work to be bad people, but things happen. And so if we can create an environment where when those things do happen, we're willing to say, hey, I made a mistake, or I got myself in trouble by not listening, by not following something. And as I always just talk about, while I was meeting with the employees, is we all come to work with personal biases and cognitive biases. And that's just the way it is. We have those. And so decision-making, we try to help you find guidelines and for steps and to make good decision-making. But sometimes maybe you still did that and got in trouble. Still talk. That's a great learning. Maybe you didn't do it all the ways you should. You felt confident, you took off, and next day you're in the clouds and you're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Kind of thing. So but it was great. I think when you can do that and you have employees that are willing to come forward, we had it on the clinical side, we had it in the maintenance side, we had it in the administrative staff side that came forward about things they had done. That's when you know that things are starting to tip. People are believing that it's okay. And that by doing this, all of us will be better.
Be better.
Yeah.
What a way to end and wrap up. Jim, thank you so very, very much, sir.
No, you're so, Mark, I love doing this. So anytime you want me to talk about it, culture to me is one of the most overlooked things in business. You hear about it a lot. You want a living organization. You want a living culture where it's not a sign on the wall, and it takes time and it takes true commitment. But I'm confident when I work with people that if you take the time and commitment at the other end, you're going to much more. You'll be a much better person yourself, but you also much better organization and much better service delivery.
Well said. Thank you, Jim.
Yeah, Mark, this has been great. So anytime.
Here we go.
All right.
Thank you, Mark Myers and Jim Adams, for the insightful interview. Safety leadership isn't just a role, it's a mindset. By applying the principles discussed today, we can cultivate safer, more empowered workplaces for all. Until next time, stay safe.
This podcast is brought to you by Baldwin Safety and Compliance, the leader in safety management for the transportation industry. Since 2004, Baldwin has been providing state-of-the-art solutions and 24/7 support to the aviation and transportation industries. Baldwin's clients include all sizes and types of transportation operators. Baldwin provides safety and related business services to commercial and non-commercial transportation operators, medical transporters, FBOs, MROs, airports, flight schools, UAS operators, firefighters, OEMs, ground transport operators, and others. Visit BaldwinSMS.com to discover how Baldwin can enhance your organization's safety program.